It was a hot Friday afternoon in August 1962. The sun was scorching the pavement at the local diner, and the sidewalk was overflowing with life. Professionals in sharp outfits, people carrying groceries, and youngsters tossing a ball near the curb filled the scene. This was the usual pulse of the neighborhood. Suddenly, the peace was shattered by the scream of sirens. Two patrol cars skidded to the curb right in front of the diner. Before the tires stopped spinning, 4 officers leaped out, clutching their heavy wooden batons. They had their sights set on a man in a clean military outfit standing quietly by the entrance. This was Samuel Reed, a 74-year-old veteran who had just returned from years of service overseas. He was simply waiting for a meal. The officers didn't bother with words or questions. They didn't ask to see his papers. To them, his service to the country meant nothing. They only saw a chance to exert their cruel authority over a black veteran. The lead officer lunged forward, slamming Samuel against the rough brick wall. The impact was brutal, leaving Samuel dazed as blood began to leak from a wound on his forehead. The attack was relentless. More officers joined in until 6 of them were raining blows down on him. 10 hits turned into 30. Samuel's cries for help filled the air, but the crowd stood frozen. They had seen this script before and knew the danger of interfering. In this city, at this time, wearing a military uniform didn't protect you if you had the wrong skin color. Samuel collapsed into a heap, his once proud uniform stained dark with blood. The officer in charge stood over his broken body, panting, and spat out a warning. Remind your friends what happens when you step out of line. What those officers didn't realize was that news of this cruelty would travel fast. Before the sun went down, a man named Bumpy Johnson would hear every detail, and he was not a man to let such an insult go unpunished. By 1962, Bumpy Johnson was much more than a guy running street games. He had transformed into a shield for the neighborhood. He was the person people sought out when the official laws turned their backs on them. During this era, the police force operated on a simple rule: rule through intimidation and keep the community silenced. The neighborhood was a boiling pot. It was growing and thriving with new shops and families. But that growth brought a heavy police presence. These officers didn't see a neighborhood to help. They saw a playground for their own power. They harassed innocent men, extorted small business owners, and dealt out violence in dark corners where no one would watch. The legal system was a closed loop that protected them. Judges and lawyers worked together to make sure no officer ever faced a day of trouble. If a regular citizen tried to complain, the paperwork was tossed out, and the officer involved got time off with pay. The message was loud and clear: you are on your own. That is why Bumpy Johnson mattered. He was no longer just a shadow in the underworld. He was the unofficial leader of the community. His reach went everywhere, from the docks to the churches and into the offices of city leaders. He looked out for the people. He paid the hospital bills for the sick, covered the rent for struggling mothers, and kept the police from bullying local shopkeepers. He built a system that actually served the people. The authorities knew exactly who Bumpy was, and it drove them mad. He was a symbol of independence they couldn't break. He proved that the community could thrive and protect itself without their crooked interference. The top brass at headquarters, including the chief, knew Bumpy's name well, but they could never seem to get their hands on him. Bumpy was too clever for them, always staying several moves ahead. Frustrated, the authorities turned their anger toward the people he cared about instead. They would harass his couriers, rough up his friends, and make life miserable for anyone seen talking to him. But they had never crossed a line like this. They had never brutalized a soldier, not in the middle of a Tuesday, in front of the diner, with dozens of people watching. Samuel Reed had spent years of his life in the service. He had crossed oceans on massive transport ships and carried out missions that required true courage. He returned home to the neighborhood just to see his mother and walk the familiar blocks of his youth. He wanted to feel like he belonged again. Instead, he walked right into a trap set by men who hated him for his skin. The officers didn't care about his medals or his honorable service. To them, the uniform was just a target. They wanted to prove that even if you fought for the country, even if you wore the flag, you were still beneath them. It was a message intended for every black soldier returning from overseas. Your sacrifice doesn't give you rights here. The violence only lasted a few minutes, but the impact would shake the entire city and reach the very top of the police department. The one thing the attackers didn't count on was a witness. A local worker nearby saw the whole thing and sprinted to a nearby lounge to find Bumpy Johnson. By 4 p.m., Bumpy was sitting in his private office when a young man burst through the door, gasping for air. "Mr. Johnson, you have to hear this," the boy managed to say. Bumpy looked up from his paperwork. He usually hated being disturbed while working on his books, but the panic in the boy's eyes caught his attention. "Speak," Bumpy said calmly. "They nearly killed Samuel Reed, the veteran. They beat him down right in front of the diner. It was the police, a whole group of them. They did it right out in the open." Bumpy set his pen down slowly. The room went cold. "Samuel Reed?" "Yes, sir. He was just trying to get some lunch. They didn't even have a reason." "Why did they pick him?" Bumpy asked. The young man shook his head. "People are saying it was the uniform. They saw him looking proud in his navy whites and decided to break him." Bumpy stood up and paced over to the window. He looked out at the busy street. The heart of the world he had spent his life building and protecting. He felt the weight of the community's trust on his shoulders. "Get me the facts," Bumpy ordered, his voice low and dangerous. "I want the names of those officers and their badge numbers. Find out which station they work out of. I want every witness to tell me exactly what they saw. And tell me about Samuel. Is he going to make it?" A local doctor is with him now. He's got several broken ribs, a snapped arm, and a serious head injury. The doctor said if they hadn't stopped when they did, he'd be in the morgue. Bumpy nodded, his mind already spinning with a plan. "Listen close. Make sure Samuel has the best doctors. Give his family whatever cash they need. He doesn't pay for a thing. Let him know I am taking care of it," Bumpy commanded. "Yes, boss. Next, I need a list. Find out exactly which officers threw those punches and who their supervisor is. Dig up everything. Where they sleep, who their kin are, which taverns they visit. I want their entire history on my desk. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear. Lastly, and do not forget this, keep my name out of it. The streets can't know. The cops can't know. This is our secret for now." "Yes, sir." Later that night, Bumpy picked up the phone. He dialed the number of a powerful man named Judge Thomas O'Malley. "Judge, we have a problem," Bumpy said the moment the line clicked open. "What sort of problem?" O'Malley asked cautiously. "The police nearly killed a war veteran down at the diner. He was a military man. He did nothing wrong. They beat him just for being black and wearing a uniform." "Good Lord, Bumpy. That is terrible. It is worse than terrible. It is a declaration of war on our neighborhood. I need a favor. I need you to ensure this gets written down in the official records. Make it a headache for them. The police chief needs to feel the fire. By tomorrow, I want every reporter in the city talking about this." The judge got the message. He tipped off a contact at the City Chronicle. By midnight, journalists were questioning people who saw the fight. When the sun came up, the headline was impossible to miss. "Police brutally attack black veteran outside local diner." But Bumpy was just getting started. He knew something the police ignored. Times were changing. There were lawyers hungry for justice and activists ready to march. Bumpy worked the phones. He contacted attorneys, community organizers, and pastors. He spun a web of influential people who suddenly cared very deeply about what happened to Samuel Reed. By the weekend, the beating was the biggest story in the city, and Bumpy Johnson, hidden in the shadows, was pulling every string. Bumpy knew that making noise wasn't enough. You had to apply pressure until the pipes burst. The police chief, A man named Commissioner Reynolds had no idea that Bumpy had spent 10 years making friends in high places. Bumpy had a brilliant lawyer on his payroll named Arthur Gold. Gold was fast and connected. The morning after the attack, Gold filed a formal grievance. By lunch, he slapped the department with a lawsuit. By dinner, major civil rights groups had joined the fight. The story went national. Papers from Washington to Chicago picked it up. Everyone was asking why a decorated hero was treated like a criminal. While the lawyers worked the daylight hours, Bumpy worked the dark. He reached out to Fat Tony Moretti, a mob boss he had a mutual respect for. They usually stayed out of each other's way, but they helped each other when the price was right. "Tony, I need you to do something for me," Bumpy said. "What do you need?" Moretti asked. "Squeeze your friends in the city council. Let them know this police brutality scandal is going to get ugly. Tell them the commissioner needs to sacrifice someone to make the bad news go away. Tell them if they refuse to listen, things will get very messy, very fast." Moretti chuckled softly. "You have a sharp mind, Johnson. I will see what strings I can pull." Almost immediately, city politicians who usually stayed quiet began demanding answers. The top brass at police headquarters felt the heat rising, and the walls were closing in. Bumpy's network of spies, the dishwashers, the street sweepers, the delivery boys, the people everyone ignored, brought him fresh secrets every hour. The police department was in a panic. The officers who beat Samuel were being grilled in back rooms. The captain who signed off on their patrol was being blamed by his bosses to save their own skins. Everyone at the station was desperate to know who leaked the story and caused this disaster. They never suspected Bumpy Johnson. They couldn't see his fingerprints on any of it. To them, it looked like a run of terrible luck. But Bumpy knew the truth. Real power isn't about using your fists, it's about control. It is about attacking from so many angles at once that your enemy freezes up. 7 days after the attack, the local paper ran a huge story featuring statements from a dozen witnesses and medical reports proving how badly Samuel was hurt. Civil rights groups demanded the officers be thrown in jail. 2 weeks later, the television stations began airing nightly reports about police violence in the neighborhood. Reporters interviewed locals and shined a light on other victims. The story wasn't just about Samuel Reed anymore. It was about a broken system. By the third week, the federal government stepped in. Agents from Washington announced they were investigating civil rights violations. Through it all, Bumpy stayed in the dark, making calls and connecting the dots. He created a storm that the police could not stop. Commissioner Reynolds was fielding angry calls from the mayor, the city council, and even federal leaders. Everyone wanted to know why the city was in chaos. They wanted to know why the police looked like villains. Reynolds had no answers because he didn't realize he was fighting a ghost. He couldn't arrest Bumpy's strategy, and Bumpy was just warming up. 3 weeks after the incident at the diner, Commissioner Reynolds called a press conference. He stood in front of a sea of microphones and cameras. "We have finished looking into the incident," Reynolds stated stiffly. 4 officers are on leave. However, we found that their actions were justified given the situation. That was a fatal mistake. In less than a day, Bumpy organized a reaction that shook the city to its core. A massive march began. 5,000 people flooded the street outside the diner, holding signs and chanting. They demanded the officers be locked up and that the commissioner step down immediately. The protest was quiet but mighty. The leaders in front were following Bumpy's secret orders to make sure the world paid attention. Photos of the crowd spread across the nation. Veterans, mothers, and children, all standing together for what was right. But Bumpy was playing a deeper game behind the curtain. He had an ace up his sleeve, Mrs. Margaret Vance. She was the personal assistant to Commissioner Reynolds and had worked there for years. Long ago, Bumpy had helped her son out of a serious legal scrape, and she never forgot it. When Bumpy asked for a look at the private files, she didn't hesitate. She slipped him the internal papers. In those stacks of paper, Bumpy found the smoking gun. The command to crack down on the diner didn't come from a low-level boss. It came directly from the top. Commissioner Reynolds had signed the order himself to crush the spirit of the neighborhood. Bumpy passed this explosive proof to Judge O'Malley, who handed it to a hungry reporter. A few days later, the headline shocked the city. Secret papers prove Commissioner ordered harassment. The article proved that Reynolds wanted his officers to bully the community. Reynolds tried to deny it, but his signature was right there in black and white. The heat was on. The mayor turned his back on him, and the city council demanded answers. Then, Bumpy delivered the final blow. He sent a private message to Reynolds: "Resign now, or I release everything else I have." Reynolds knew he was checkmated. His allies were gone, and the federal agents were circling. A fight would only destroy him. Exactly 1 month after Samuel Reed was beaten, Commissioner Reynolds quit. The news hit the stands on a Tuesday. It was a historic moment, a powerful police boss taken down by the people. The streets erupted in joy. Samuel Reed was given a large cash settlement for his pain. The 4 officers who attacked him were arrested and charged. And through it all, nobody ever knew that Bumpy Johnson was the Grand Master who played the whole game from the shadows. The new chief promised to fix the department and train his men better. But the real story wasn't about new rules. It was about a man who understood how the world truly works. He proved that sometimes the best weapon isn't a gun, it's a plan. It's knowing how to push the right buttons all at once. Bumpy had taught the city a lesson. The message was simple: you cannot bully this neighborhood and think you'll get away with it. You cannot hurt our people and expect to walk free. There is a man watching who has the friends, the brains, and the patience to make sure you pay. Even if it takes a month, even if it means calling in every favor in the city, and even if it means forced retirement for the man at the top. Whispers of Bumpy's work moved through the streets like a wildfire. People realized Bumpy wasn't just a tough guy from the neighborhood. He was a guardian and a genius who could pull strings from the sidewalk to the judge's office to the front page of the news. The police never caught on. They believed the whole thing was just a streak of bad luck. Bumpy had used so many different people to get the job done that no one could trace the path back to his door. Almost overnight, the way people looked at Bumpy changed. He went from being respected to being a hero. He wasn't just a guy making money. He was the man who broke a corrupt chief. He was the one who stood up for a soldier and proved that the little guy could win if he was smart enough. Samuel Reed left the city soon after, taking his family to Chicago for a new beginning. The money from the city gave him a clean slate. But before he hopped on the bus, he stopped by Bumpy's office to say thank you. "I don't know the details of what you did," Samuel told him, "but I know it was you." Bumpy just gave a small nod. "In this neighborhood, we look out for each other. That's how we make it." The 4 officers were eventually found guilty. It was the first time the city had ever successfully locked up its own for being too violent on the job. It changed everything and gave hope to others who had been hurt. The new chief, a man named Robert Miller, actually followed through on his promises. He brought in fresh faces and started programs to talk to the neighbors. The violence from the police dropped significantly. None of those changes would have happened if Samuel Reed hadn't been attacked at the diner. And more importantly, none of it would have happened if Bumpy Johnson hadn't known exactly how to win. As 1962 drew to a close, Bumpy Johnson had reached a level of power that made him untouchable. His name carried weight in every corner of the city. The police were wary of him, politicians showed him respect, and the residents of the neighborhood knew they had a protector who would use every available resource to fight for them. The resignation of the police chief remained a legendary topic of conversation for years. Bumpy lived for another 6 years after that victory, serving as a shield for his community until he passed away in 1968. The most important part of this story is often overlooked. Bumpy didn't use a single weapon to take down the chief. He didn't use threats or physical force. Instead, he relied on something much more effective: intelligence, long-term planning, and social leverage. Bumpy realized that true dominance isn't about who has the strongest grip. It's about who can see the entire board. He knew how to coordinate the news, the legal system, and local leaders to work toward one goal at the same time. This brilliance is what set Bumpy apart from every other street figure of his time and turned him into a legend. The lesson here stretches far beyond the streets or a single man. It's about realizing that even when systems fail or institutions turn against a community, you are not helpless. With the right connections and a sharp mind, you can create enough pressure to force the hands of the powerful. You can demand accountability. The attack on Samuel Reed could have easily been buried and forgotten, just another sad story in a long list of injustices. Instead, it became the spark that toppled a commissioner, changed legal history, and forced a complete overhaul of how the police treated the neighborhood. All of this happened because one man knew how to play the game better than the people who wrote the rules. If this story moved you, if you respect how Bumpy managed to win such a massive fight without ever pulling a trigger, be sure to show your support and follow for more. We share stories like this every day, and the next one is even more unbelievable. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Would love to know where our voice reaches.